Welcome to the discussion, part 2 of the Journey to Technology, Modernization, and Government, sponsored by Paga on Federal News Radio, part of the Federal News Network. I'm your host, Jason Miller. My guests today are Rob Schadey, the Director of Business Mission in the Program Executive Office for Enterprise Information Systems at the U.S. Army, and Don Schuerman, the Chief Technology Officer and Vice President of Product Marketing at Paga. Gentlemen, welcome to the discussion.
Thank you.
Before we get started, let me set some context for our discussion. Army CIO Lieutenant General Bruce Crawford told me late last year about his plans to modernize the service's technology. General Crawford's strategy is focused on network modernization, application rationalization, and data center consolidation that involves, no surprise, a more aggressive move to the cloud. Now, at the same time, the CIO's office is supporting the Army's Artificial Intelligence Task Force across 6 areas. One of those areas, cloud infrastructure, to ensure the data is accessible and protected at all times. Now, General Crawford said the Army will update its data strategy and continue to implement enterprise data analytics strategy as a way to further support those AI efforts. Now, that's one path. A second path is around IT modernization that the Army is heading down is enterprise IT as a service. Now, this is just at the very beginning stages, and this initiative, the Army hopes, will actually speed up the modernization process. The Army estimates that 70% of its servers, routers, and end-user devices on its 288 worldwide facilities are at or near end of life. That figure is even higher for the equipment that handles voice communications. That's about 90%. Now, General Crawford says under the service's current modernization methodologies, replacing all that gear would take at least until 2030. And in the meantime, it would be stuck paying bills involved in maintaining an enormous amount of legacy infrastructure. The Army's challenges really no different than many agencies, except for the size and the breadth of it all, 288 facilities worldwide. So how can the Army and really any agency, for that matter, will change the proverbial tire as the car is still driving? Well, that's where our guests come in. Rob, I just laid out the Army and the challenges you guys have and all the work you're going to get to do over the next few years. Let's back up a second and just talk IT modernization. Go walk me through the strategy a little bit.
Sure. First and foremost, PEO EIS's strategy is really about affecting sound enterprise governance with respect to our programs and the execution and implementation of that modernization approach. So most important for us is the success in modernization with alignment of our senior leadership and our budget. So vehicles looking at services is a sound way to understand better what industry can offer to us and how we can take advantage of that through the services-based approach, because we can move very quickly and we can also support the soldiers and the end users that are out within the Army's infrastructure. The other part is PEO EIS is focused on data governance and dashboard technologies as a part of our modernization efforts, and making sure that we support that application modernization with those sound technologies toward cloud and disconnected operations for our soldiers is really at the heart of where we're at.
There's a couple things I just want to pull in the string a little bit on. First is looking at the vehicles. There's a lot of push towards, okay, well, what contracts do you need or what contracts you don't need and what services? And are you guys looking at for specific types of vehicles that are IT modernization centric, or you're just saying, okay, what do we have today that we can already use? Do we need new ones? Do we need old ones? Where does IT modernization fit into that part?
I think there is a balance between contract vehicles such as firm fixed price and other contracting vehicles where we're looking at different methodologies such as OTA processes. And finding the balance within those is really important. And again, understanding better how industry can support our requirements and making sure we have a good definition of those requirements is at the heart of where we're trying to get after with respect to OTA, firm fixed price, and the way we're going to consume those services as an Army.
Don, Rob said something very important, good definition of those requirements. And I think that's one of the challenges I hear time and again when we talk to agencies about IT modernization. Give me a sense of what you're seeing. Or do they understand what they need to modernize, or is that still part of the biggest challenge that agencies face?
Well, I think there are a couple of challenges, right? There's the technology challenge of sort of this crushing weight of systems, right? In many cases, that will be end of lifed, right? I think there's, we got very anticipatory a number of years ago about the Y2K bug, right? That turned out not to be much, right? But I do think there is the COBOL programmer cliff, of basically all of these people who are expertise in mainframe programming that still drives a lot of the agency and the commercial work in the industry. And there's a race against the clock to modernize that stuff because the talent to maintain it really no longer exists and is not necessarily coming out of the educational system that we have today. Right? So there's those sets of technology challenges. I think there's the contracting budgeting challenge of thinking about how you buy services that are increasingly subscription driven, right? Because that's generally how you buy them, and fitting that into a procurement model that was really used to sort of fixed price. I know what it's going to cost day one, right? And it's going to be set. And I think that also aligns a lot with the challenge that I've seen as organizations struggle to move from traditional sort of waterfall-based approach to projects, right? Big fixed cost, I'm going to do this for 3 years and I'm going to be done, to a much more agile approach where the details of one sprint aren't known until I'm well into the first one. And then I think the third piece of this, and this is where you get to, I think, really understanding the requirements, is we don't want to modernize just to the point of having new technology. We want to modernize because, as Rob said, we want to improve the experiences for the soldier. We want to improve the experiences for the civilians and end users who work with these systems. So making sure that we're doing all of this in the context of what's the new process, what's the new experience that we want to deliver, so that we're actually building the technology that supports that, not just taking existing logic and moving it forward onto new tech.
I enjoyed the Cobalt Cliff.
Yeah.
We used to joke about Fiscal Cliff,
Yeah.
but not Cobalt Cliff. It's the next, my next Twitter handle. Talk maybe a little bit about that idea of the legacy and just the burden. We talk a lot about the legacy burden that agencies have, but what do you see when you talk to your clients? What makes it real?
Well, I think that one is, again, the amount of time spent maintaining legacy technology, and depending, on who you talk to in IT organizations, I hear everything from 60% of our time to 90% of our time is spent maintaining, right? And that's time that's not being invested in actually innovating the experiences of the future. So I think trying to get to a point that you're building a platform that doesn't just require you to maintain it, but actually allows you to bring it forward and build new things, I think is what every, frankly, engineer and IT person wants to do. But I also, again, I think that there are, when we look at the need to provide data visibility and transparency to people, the systems that we have today weren't built to do that. They weren't built to operate in real time. They weren't built to connect to the kinds of cloud infrastructure that we have. So even if you want to extend them or augment them with a third-party service, the technology to connect something that's legacy up to something that's restful and lives on the cloud just isn't there 100%. So there's a lot of sort of gating and throttling of possibility that I think this legacy causes. And I think that's one of the driving factors to kind of push through it and get it modernized.
I think you're exactly right. When I think about our legacy challenges and what the Army's up against, we really have to focus on hybrid. And what I mean by that is the interoperability of some of the legacy aspects that we have with respect to cloud. And that's really critical with data. So we're faced with the challenges of putting application programming interfaces in place so that we can support the movement of the data across our network in support of the missions that we have. And I think what's really pivotal to that is working through vehicles such as EITaaS to enable those capabilities and put those capabilities in place to support those efforts and missions.
And those real quick, EITaaS, Enterprise IT as a Service.
Yes.
Just make sure people know that. Go ahead, Don.
Well, the word that Rob used that is, I think, key is this concept of hybrid, right? We're not moving, I don't think, to a cloud-only future, right? It wouldn't be technically, I don't think, feasible, right? Nor do I think the budget to get there makes a lot of sense. But what you want to get to is an architecture that allows legacy or on-premise systems to exist with third-party vendor services. And I think over time, it's all going to look cloudy in the sense that even the stuff we run ourselves is going to have containers and it's going to be deployed on virtualized systems, and I'm going to be able to run DevOps against it so I can make changes rapidly. but I want my cloud, my private cloud, and various third-party clouds that I might choose to pull from the vendor landscape to interoperate together nicely. And I think you're finally starting to see some of that. Google announced some things in the last month or so that were really around allowing organizations to manage multi-cloud environments. And so I think that is the world that slowly but surely we're all sort of headed towards.
Rob, one of the things that Don was talking about as well, as besides the COBOL piece and the legacy, was the contract budgeting challenges that come with it. And that's something obviously PEOEIS takes a lot of time out of me. When you started off, you talked about the different contracting and looked at the different vehicles. The move to a subscription-based or consumption model has still been probably the slowest piece that we've seen across government. Are you guys starting to find a way to move there, or is that still maybe the one big challenge that is standing in your way?
I think some of the challenges with subscription-based models include how we actually work with our third parties to get there. Amazon Web has availability and resources. I'm going to pause. So AWS services have resources that are available, but they will only accept billing on a monthly basis. So trying to work through a third party to put that together and make that happen is kind of a critical aspect to the way that we acquire. And we are very much wanting to consume only what we need to use as a part of that, which makes it difficult from the aspects of a firm fixed price paradigm model. So maybe it's how we redefine firm fixed price for the periods of time that we need it that will help enable us to a utilization-based approach in the cloud.
So let me put a finer point on that, because when you say define firm fixed price for the period we want to use it, you could have a customer, or the Army PEOEIS could say, for the month of June, we think we're going to use X. And then for July, we're going to use X minus 1, and then for August, we'll use X plus 2, that type of thing? Or are you even talking about a pay-as-you-go model where over 6 months, we won't use more than $1 million, but we're going to do the billing as we use it? Or am I messed up all of it?
No, I think we're really focused on first understanding the way that we can consume, and then the periods of time that we can spin up the resources when they're needed and spin down those resources when they're not. And being able to put some sort of firm fixed price around the periods of time that we're using it versus when we're not using it do fall within that firm fixed price paradigm model. And those are the areas that we're trying to explore. Good example is GSA measured services. That just hit the street. So we're actually looking at using those types of vehicles to consume cloud to better understand how we can support our customers and functionals with respect to those acquisition models.
Don, react to that as well, because one of the biggest challenges that I think a lot of vendors have is they're used to paying by the drink, right? If you know, Paga, if you were buying cloud services from a vendor, you're paying as you need it. But going back to the government world, that's not necessarily the case. How do you guys deal with that, either internally or externally?
Yeah. Well, I think I think that this is a great conversation for me as a vendor to be able to listen to, right? Because I think it's incumbent on us to work with our partners in the agency side, the government side, to begin to develop sort of plans that work for both needs, right? That work across both, and understand the sort of complexities and challenges, right, of the government contracting process, but also, I think, have a view towards the benefits of a usage-based pricing model, right, which I think does allow you to burst up and burst down, right? And I think there are lots of scenarios when you think about the Army and the utilization of software where being able to come in and out of software as you need it at different time schedules probably actually economically makes sense in terms of the spend. You know, in our client base, which goes across both the commercial and the governmental side, we still see mixes. We still see clients who, you know, prefer to pay us on a more traditional fixed fee basis. And for example, in a lot of the manufacturing space, there's capital expenditure that they associate with software, right? And that fixed fee cost still makes much more sense to them than it does a sort of monthly subscription. And so as a vendor, we try to be flexible and work with that. Obviously, we like to see more of the software relationships move towards that subscription model, but we have to be aware of where our clients are coming from.
And Rob, talk a little bit about, are you guys experimenting yet? Are you trying this consumption-based model?
From an Army perspective and PEO EIS, we're really working to understand applications that are the right fit in cloud, but then also look at our customer and user utilization within the cloud. And we do know, based off the utilization and periods of time, especially with respect to financial type of systems, there's certain periods of the year where they're very heavily used and we have to spin up that utilization to support that. And there's long periods of time where they're not as heavily used and we don't need as much resources within the cloud. So that's a perfect opportunity to kind of explore what that means and what we can realize in terms of cost savings or benefit.
I think that's a great example of financial systems. End of the month, beginning of the month, whatever it is, they need more resources, and in the middle of the month they probably need less. We also see that with certain other types of needs, maybe not so much for the Army, but I know in the civilian world. Are you starting to see that, Don, as well?
Great example. We're working with the U.S. Census, right? And you talk about something that has a spike in need, right? Every 4 years, pretty big deal, and then it comes right back down again. So we're working with them to deploy that on GovCloud so that they can take advantage of that utilization model and also support the pretty substantial spike in both citizens and also census takers using that software. So to me, that's a classic example of where you see that kind of time-based.
And I imagine as well that for the census, it's different maybe discussion, but just you'll also see something where at the beginning of the month when all the enumerators go out, they'll see a spike, and at the end of the month when, or some sort of approach that way.
Right, and the cloud-based model allows you to support that, right? So we've done a lot of testing around sort of validating the various expected peak usage to make sure that it can support it, but it also doesn't demand that they actually deploy for peak usage all through the cycle.
Prepared. All right, on that note, let's take a quick break and come back. We can continue our discussion. You're listening to part 2 of the journey to technology modernization in government, sponsored by Paga on Federal News Radio, part of the Federal News Network.